I could feel the weight of their gazes before I even stepped through the revolving doors of the Regal Meridian Hotel. I didn't need to look at the people inside, rich men and women in their shiny, perfect lives, to know how I'd be seen. Another person who didn't belong. Another outsider in a world that had no space for me. I looked at my reflection in the glass doors, barely recognizing myself. The black suit I wore was nothing special, modest, forgettable, and perfect for tonight. My hair was pulled back in a neat, understated way, the kind that made me blend into the background, just the way I'd been doing for years. 30 years, to be exact. I'd spent most of my life learning to disappear in plain sight. Tonight would be no different. At least, that was the plan. I stepped inside, and immediately, the hum of voices hit me. The laughter. The clinking of glasses. The sound of wealth in its rawest form. My brother, Nathan, stood near the champagne fountain, an overconfident smile plastered across his face as he chatted with his wife, Delilah. Both were draped in designer clothes that screamed money, but it was the kind of wealth that wasn't earned, it was inherited. It was theirs because the world had handed it to them, not because they worked for it. My parents flanked them like sentinels, scanning the crowd for anyone important enough to impress. When they spotted me walking toward them, their expressions shifted. Not in recognition. No. It was something closer to alarm. A subtle tension rippled through the group, and I could feel their eyes flicker in my direction, then quickly look away. "Excuse me, are you the help?" Nathan's voice rang out loud enough for several guests nearby to hear. "Staff should use the side entrance." The words hit me like a slap, but I didn't let my face betray a thing. My brother, just 3 feet away from me, pretending as if he'd never known me, never sat at the same dinner table, never borrowed money from our parents while I worked double shifts to pay my own way through college. Delilah stepped forward, eyeing me up and down like I was a stain on a fine piece of furniture. "Sweetheart," she cooed with that fake, syrupy sweetness, "staff uniforms are supposed to be navy. You're out of dress code." I stopped. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't breathe. But I didn't move. I didn't blink. I was so sick of this. The subtle humiliation. The casual dismissal. The way they pretended not to know me when I wasn't dressed the way they thought I should be. They wouldn't have been able to recognize me if I wasn't wearing this suit. If they thought I wasn't someone who was useful to them. The CEO of Aurelius Tech, Holden Marks, stood just behind them with his wife, Juliet. He caught the scene, a smug grin curling on his lips, though he tried to hide it behind his champagne glass. "People like her should know their place," Holden muttered, not quite quietly enough for me to miss it. His words were a quiet admission of the game they'd all been playing. "Miss," a waiter approached me hesitantly, "the service entrance is around back if you need to check in with catering." I was used to the sting of these kinds of words. But tonight felt different. The ache I usually carried in my chest burned hotter. Instead of wanting to shrink into the shadows, I stood taller. Stronger. I excused myself, walking toward the terrace, leaving them behind to continue their fake conversations, their hollow laughter. The city spread out beneath me. A million lights blinking against the dark sky, each one a life I would never know. I pulled my phone from my pocket, checked my email. A single notification glowed on the screen, Aurelius Tech, $3 billion government contract pending final signature from founding partner. I allowed myself a small smile, the kind that had nothing to do with happiness. It was a smile born from patience, from everything I had quietly built over the years. I sent a message through the executive management portal, emergency board meeting, 8:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. Mandatory attendance. The founding authority channel bypassed every layer of corporate hierarchy. Holden Marks would get that message within minutes, but he wouldn't know who sent it. The founding authority had been silent for 5 years, an anonymous entity that owned 58% of Aurelius Tech. And for 5 years, no one had ever suspected that the woman standing on the terrace had been the one pulling the strings. I walked back into the ballroom, past my family without sparing them a glance. They were clustered together now, laughing at something Delilah had said. I could hear her voice cut through the crowd, as fake and venomous as ever. "Did you see that poor girl?" she said. She looked absolutely lost. Someone really should train these event staff better. Evan chuckled, his fake laugh bouncing off the walls. Probably some temp worker trying to sneak into the party. Can you imagine the embarrassment? My mother caught my eye for a fraction of a second before looking away. My father steadied his champagne flute, pretending the bubbles held the answers to the universe. I kept walking, ignoring them all. I had heard worse from them before. Much worse. But tonight, their words felt like evidence. Evidence for the case I had been building my entire life. The valet brought my car around, a modest sedan, the kind that matched the modest apartment I kept in a quiet neighborhood, far from the glitz and glam of my family's world. No one knew about the penthouse downtown. The investment portfolio. The shares I owned that made me one of the wealthiest women in the state. I kept it all hidden. I kept it all hidden because I wanted freedom. I wanted to know who people were when they thought I had nothing to offer. And now, I knew. I drove home through the rain-soaked streets of New York. The city lights blurred past my window, but I barely saw them. I was already thinking ahead to tomorrow, to the meeting that would expose them all. The next day, at 8:30 a.m., everyone who had ever looked down on me would know the truth. Not because I wanted revenge, but because I was tired of being invisible to the people who were supposed to love me. I walked up to my apartment, standing in front of the mirror in the hallway. The woman staring back at me was calm, composed, ready. "They called me the help tonight," I said to my reflection. "Tomorrow, they'll call me boss." I turned off the lights and went to bed, setting my alarm for 5 a.m. Tomorrow, the real work would begin. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat in front of my desk, the glow of my laptop screen casting shadows across the room. I kept thinking about the gala, about how easily they dismissed me, how quickly they pushed me into the background. The way my brother's voice had cut through the crowd, making me feel smaller than I already was. It was almost like they didn't know I existed unless it suited their image. People like her should know their place. Nathan's words echoed in my head. I should have let it slide. I should have walked away, let them enjoy their precious night. But that moment had been a tipping point. This was no longer about them. I leaned forward, fingers hovering over the keyboard. The truth had always been out of reach, hidden beneath layers of lies, lies that my family had been building for decades. But tonight, I was about to expose it. And I wouldn't be doing it alone. I typed a few quick sentences and hit send. It was a message I had crafted with care. Emergency board meeting. 8:30 a.m. tomorrow. Mandatory attendance. It wasn't the entire company, just the top brass, those who mattered, those who didn't know what was coming. The email wasn't going to stop there. It was just the beginning. My phone buzzed on the desk, pulling me from my thoughts. The name on the screen read Sophia Grant. I answered without hesitation. "It's done," I said, my voice steady, though my heart was racing. "I can't believe you're actually doing it," she replied, her tone wavering between admiration and worry. "You think I'm bluffing?" I asked, leaning back in my chair. "Tomorrow, everything changes. My family won't even know what hit them." Sophia was quiet for a moment. "What happens next?" I paused. The plan had been set in motion. I had all the pieces in place. It was just a matter of time. Tomorrow, I'll make sure they see the truth. I'll make them feel the weight of it. The morning came too quickly. I stood in front of my mirror, adjusting my suit. A charcoal gray, sharp, but understated. Perfect for the boardroom. No flash, no drama. The moment would speak for itself. I checked my phone one more time. Another email popped up, this time from Holden Marks, CEO of Aurelius Tech, my company. I opened it. "Looking forward to meeting with you today. Let's finalize the deal." I could feel my pulse quicken. The $5 billion contract was just the tip of the iceberg. It wasn't the money that mattered. It was everything else, the control, the power, the feeling that for once, no one could ignore me. The car ride to the office felt longer than it should have. The streets of New York stretched out in front of me, the skyline cutting into the sky. It was a world of glistening glass and steel, cold, calculated, the perfect place for someone like me. Someone who knew how to play the game, even when it seemed like they were on the outside. When I arrived at the building, the security guard at the front desk gave me a slight nod. "Good morning, Mr. Cross," he said, his voice polite but distant. He wasn't surprised to see me. He didn't need to be. I took the elevator up to the 42nd floor, my mind already on the meeting. The conference room was quiet, set up for the day's discussions. I glanced at the clock. 8 a.m. The board members would arrive soon. The room was nearly empty, save for a few tech specialists adjusting the presentation equipment. I sat at the head of the table, my laptop open in front of me. The documents for the $5 billion deal were ready. But they weren't the ones I was here for. They would come later. I opened the encrypted file I had worked on with Sophia for days. It was a dossier, one that contained everything my family had been hiding. The paid actors. The fake family image. The business deals that had been falsified to make the Cross family seem more successful than we really were. The evidence was airtight. The door clicked open behind me. I didn't look up. I didn't need to. I knew who was walking in. One by one, the board members entered, taking their seats. Most of them had no idea who I was, who had called this meeting. They looked at me like I was just another tech specialist in a suit. None of them expected what was coming. The last to enter was Holden Marks, the man I had hired as CEO. He was smiling, his hands clasped in front of him, looking as calm and composed as ever. But I could see the tension in his eyes when he saw me sitting at the head of the table. "Mr. Cross," he said, his voice almost too smooth. "I didn't realize you'd be joining us today. I thought we were meeting to finalize the deal." I didn't smile. "We are. But first, there's something I need to address." Holden's expression flickered. I could feel the air in the room shift. The executives around the table began to murmur, sensing the tension building. I connected my laptop to the projector. A single file appeared on the screen. My name flashed across it in bold letters. Majority shareholder, 58% ownership. A silence fell over the room. Everyone stopped breathing for a moment. Holden looked like he'd seen a ghost. His face drained of color. "This is the truth," I said, my voice cold. "I own this company. Not you, Holden. Not you, Nathan. Me." I glanced at Nathan, who was sitting near the middle of the table. His mouth fell open, and I could see the confusion, then the anger flicker across his face. "No, this isn't," Nathan started, his voice shaking. I held up a hand. "It is. You see, Nathan, I've been watching everything. All the lies. All the games you've been playing. The paid actors. The falsified deals. The stories you've created to make yourselves look better. All of it." A collective gasp echoed around the room. I could hear the rapid tapping of fingers on phones as people started to pull up company records, searching for proof. Their faces shifted as the reality began to sink in. "I know it's hard to believe," I continued, "but everything you've worked for, Nathan, it's built on nothing. I am the one who's been making the real decisions here." Holden stood up abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "This is a mistake," he said, voice cracking. "This can't be true." "I think you'll find it's all true," I said. Nathan turned to Holden, desperation in his eyes. "You can't let this happen. You can't." But it was too late. The truth was out. And nothing would ever be the same again. I leaned back in my chair, watching the chaos unfold. Every single person in this room, every face that had ignored me, every handshake I'd been excluded from, today, they would learn the truth. and I would make sure they'd never forget who I was. Tomorrow, the world would know the Cross family for what it really was, a carefully crafted illusion. The question now was, what would I do with the power I'd just exposed? The morning light streamed through the massive glass windows of the boardroom, casting long shadows across the polished wooden table. It should have been the calm before the storm, but instead, the air felt thick with tension. Every person seated around the table knew something was about to happen, but none of them could predict how quickly the ground beneath them would shift. The room was still, the silence hanging in the air like a tightrope waiting to snap. I watched them carefully, Holden, Marks, Nathan, and the rest of the executives, all pretending to look at the papers in front of them, their discomfort palpable. Their eyes kept flicking to me, then quickly away, as if they feared they might somehow catch a glimpse of the truth in my expression. "Shall we begin?" I asked, my voice cutting through the stillness. I was calm, but underneath the cool exterior, my mind was a storm of thoughts. I was about to change everything. Holden cleared his throat and looked up from the pile of documents. "Of course, Mr. Cross. But first, let's discuss the final details of the contract." I raised a hand, halting him mid-sentence. "The contract can wait. Today, we're discussing something more important. The truth." The word hung in the air like a confession. The executives shifted uneasily in their seats. I tapped a few keys on my laptop, and a single image flashed onto the large screen behind me. It was simple, just a document, but it spoke volumes. A list of names and numbers. Names of people who had been compensated handsomely for their roles in the family's carefully constructed narrative. People who had been hired to play the parts of loving relatives, business partners, and loyal friends. "These are the actors," I said, leaning forward. "Paid to be family. Paid to be loyal. Paid to keep up the illusion that the Cross family is something it's not. Something perfect. Something you've been using to manipulate the world." There was a sharp intake of breath from the room, but no one dared to speak. Holden's face had gone pale, and Nathan, sitting next to him, was visibly shaking. "Mr. Cross," Holden managed to say, his voice faltering, "this is a serious accusation." "Are you suggesting?" "Not suggesting," I cut him off. "Exposing. This is just the start. These people, your so-called family, they've been paid to pretend. To help you build a reputation that's nothing more than a house of cards." I let the weight of the words settle, watching their reactions closely. They were stunned. Completely taken off guard. Nathan looked at me, his face hardening. "You're going to destroy everything, aren't you?" he said, his voice laced with disbelief and anger. I stood up, walking to the edge of the table, my eyes never leaving him. "No, Nathan. You've been the one destroying everything. Using people. Using me. You and Dad. You've treated me like I don't exist unless you can use me for your benefit. But not anymore." The tension in the room spiked. Every single person around the table was feeling it, sensing the shift, the unraveling. "We're talking about more than just a business deal here," I continued. "This is about power. About control. The people at this table have lived their lives thinking they could control me, make me play the part of the dutiful son. But the reality is, I was the one pulling the strings all along." Holden opened his mouth, but no words came out. He wasn't in control anymore. I could see it in his eyes. The mask was slipping. I could feel the power shifting to me. The silent partner. The one they'd never seen coming. As the silence stretched, I let the truth seep into the room. "This is my company now," I said, my voice steady. "And I'm not going to let anyone here," I turned to Nathan, "anyone, make me feel invisible again." I let the words hang in the air. And then, as if the dam had broken, I dropped the bomb. "I'm implementing a full audit of the company. We'll be reviewing all contracts, all executive decisions, and, yes, the ownership stakes. The truth will come out. All of it." Holden's chair scraped against the floor as he stood up abruptly. His voice was shaky, desperate. "You can't do this. You can't just. I can, I interrupted. And I will. The room was in chaos now. Executives pulled out their phones, whispering, typing. Some were still trying to process what was happening, while others began to scramble, already trying to figure out how to save themselves. Nathan stood up, his face flushed with fury. This is crazy. You're going to ruin everything. Your family, for God's sake. What's wrong with you? I turned to face him. What's wrong with me? What's wrong with you, Nathan? For years, I've watched you take everything. I've watched you fail upwards while I did all the work. And now you want to stand there and lecture me about family? His anger was raw, unrestrained. You think you're better than me now? You think you have the right to do this? Not better, I said, leaning in. Just done. I turned my back on him, walking toward the door, my footsteps echoing in the silence behind me. I wasn't finished yet. The next move was already in place. The audit would begin, and the secrets would be laid bare. I had just made the first move in a game they didn't even know they were playing. But as I left the room, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. I wasn't sure who or why, but I knew I wasn't alone. The tension in the air had become palpable. There was something bigger at play here. Something I hadn't seen yet. And it was closing in. I stopped in the hallway, my hand on the door handle, before stepping out into the bustling lobby. The sound of footsteps behind me made my heart skip. Someone was following. But who? And why? Before I could turn around, the phone in my pocket buzzed, a message flashing on the screen. It was from Sophia. I know what you're doing. Be careful. Someone's watching. My heart dropped. She knew too. Something bigger was happening, and I was walking right into it. The following day, the phone calls started coming in. At first, it was just a trickle, a few emails from some of the board members, all asking for clarification. Then, as the hours wore on, it turned into a flood. Executives who had avoided eye contact with me now sought me out, almost desperate for an explanation. But I wasn't about to let them think this was some petty family drama. This was about the truth. The truth I had been hiding, the truth that had been buried in all those carefully crafted lies. I leaned back in my chair, the soft hum of the office building around me a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding just below the surface. The window overlooked the skyline, a city full of people who would never know what had happened in that boardroom yesterday. And yet, I knew that the ripple effects would be felt far and wide. The illusion of the Cross family had cracked, and now the world was about to see the truth behind it. I wasn't just sitting on secrets anymore. I was holding the keys to the kingdom. The message from Sophia had been clear, someone's watching. But who? I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this than just my family's betrayal. Whoever had been watching me from the shadows had their own agenda. And they weren't going to let me have all the power without a fight. I grabbed my phone, dialing Sophia's number. It rang twice before she picked up. Did you mean what you said? I asked, keeping my voice steady, but there was a sharp edge to it. Someone's been following me. Yeah, she replied, her voice tense. I wasn't sure at first, but it's definitely happening. I've seen them. You need to be careful. I paused, staring out at the city again. You didn't tell me everything, did you? There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then, finally, Sophia spoke, her words slow, measured. What do you mean? The deal, I said. I've been pulling the strings for years. But something feels off. If someone's been watching, we're not just talking about a family betrayal anymore. Another pause. What are you thinking? That there's more going on here than we're seeing. Something bigger. Something I didn't plan for. Sophia's voice was barely above a whisper. You think someone's using you? The words hit me like a punch to the stomach. It was a possibility I hadn't allowed myself to consider. But now, the pieces were starting to fall into place. Before I could respond, the door to my office swung open. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. Nathan. I quickly ended the call, pocketing the phone, and turned my gaze to him. His face was a mask of anger, but there was something else, something colder, lurking beneath it. "You really think you can just do this?" he spat, his voice dripping with disdain. "Exposing us like that? You're going to ruin everything we've built." "I didn't ruin it," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You did." He took a step closer, his eyes narrowing. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. You think you've won, but you're just a pawn. All of you," he said, throwing a glance toward the door, where the shadow of someone else lingered. I froze. There was someone behind him. Before I could say anything, Holden Marks entered the room, his presence filling the space. His calm exterior belied the tension coiling in his shoulders. He looked at Nathan, then at me, before speaking. "You think you have all the power now," Holden said, his voice cold, detached. "But you don't. You've only just scratched the surface. We've been running this company for years, and we're not about to let it go because of some childish outburst." I stood up from my desk, my hands clenched at my sides. "I don't need to take your threats anymore, Holden." Holden smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "You're in over your head, Arlo. You think you've exposed the truth, but you've only opened a door to something much darker. There are people, powerful people, who won't let you get away with this. They'll make sure you regret it." His words hit me like ice water. But the coldness didn't last. It ignited something inside me. "You're right about one thing," I said, my voice hardening. "You've been running this company for years. But I'm running it now." Nathan scoffed, crossing his arms. "You think your little move yesterday has changed anything? You're just a shadow, Arlo. You always have been." I stepped forward, closing the distance between us. My heart raced, but I forced myself to remain calm, steady. "I'm not a shadow anymore. You've spent your life making sure I stayed in the background. But I've been planning this for years. And now you're going to see what happens when I stop being invisible." Holden looked at me, his eyes cold, calculating. "You've made a mistake, Arlo. A big one." I could feel the weight of his words, the threat they carried. But I wasn't backing down now. I wasn't going to let them control me anymore. "If I've made a mistake," I said, meeting his gaze, "then you'll be the first to regret it." As they left the room, the weight of their presence lingered, but something had shifted. The tension was thick, the air charged with electricity. They weren't the only ones who had power now. I had my own, and I was going to make sure they felt it. I turned to my desk, trying to steady my breathing, but my mind was already racing. Sophia's warning echoed in my mind. "You need to be careful." The message was clear now. There was someone out there, pulling the strings behind the scenes, watching, waiting for the right moment to strike. And that moment was coming. The question was, who would make the first move? I could feel the walls closing in. The truth was finally out there, spreading like wildfire. But the more I thought about it, the more I realized that the truth was only the beginning. The board meeting earlier had felt like a slow burn, with everyone sitting in that sterile room, avoiding eye contact as I held the reins. They knew what had just happened. They knew what I had done. And none of them were comfortable with it. I leaned back in my chair, letting the tension wash over me. There was no turning back now. I had uncovered more than just my family's deceit. I had pulled back a veil that covered something much darker. But as my father's warning echoed in my mind, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about a company anymore. This was about power, about control, about secrets hidden in plain sight. The message had come earlier, a nondescript email with a subject line that chilled me to the bone: "The deal's not over. There's more you need to know." It was from someone on the inside, someone close to my family, someone who had access to everything. It had no signature, no name, just a chilling line: "They're watching. Someone is about to make their move." I felt the muscles in my shoulders tighten, the weight of the unknown pressing down on me. This wasn't just about taking back what was mine. Someone was playing a much larger game, and they were using me as a pawn. As I checked my phone for any updates, a knock on the door broke my thoughts. Before I could say anything, it creaked open, and a figure stepped into the room. Nathan. His expression was colder than I'd ever seen, the typical arrogance replaced with something more sinister. He shut the door behind him, locking it with a deliberate click. "Is this how it's going to go?" he asked, his voice low. "You expose us in front of everyone, and now you think you're untouchable?" I didn't flinch. "I'm not untouchable, Nathan. I just know how to play the game better than you." He smirked, but the humor didn't reach his eyes. "You think you've won? You've only just begun to see what's really going on here. You don't understand the forces you're up against." "What are you talking about?" I asked, my tone sharp, cutting through the silence between us. "The truth is out. Your family's secrets are laid bare. What's left?" He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You really think they'll let you get away with this? You're nothing but a tool. They've been watching, and now they know you're ready to play. They won't hesitate to take you down." The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end. I could feel the weight of his words sinking in. He wasn't just threatening me. He was warning me. "Who's they?" I demanded. "Who's watching?" Nathan's eyes flickered with something, fear. Guilt, before he masked it with a shrug. "You're not as clever as you think, Arlo. This isn't just about us anymore. You're in the middle of something much bigger than you understand." I felt a pang of doubt slip through my resolve. "What are you saying? You really want to know?" His voice was almost a whisper now. "You're being played. All of you. This company. This deal, it's all just a smokescreen for something far more dangerous. I'm not the one you need to worry about." I took a step back. "What the hell are you talking about?" Before Nathan could answer, the door burst open again, this time with a force that rattled the room. Sophia. She didn't even give us a chance to react. Her eyes were wide with urgency, her breath shallow as she stepped into the room. "They know," she said, her voice shaking. "They're coming for you." A wave of panic washed over me, my heart racing. "Who's coming for me?" "There's no time to explain," she snapped. "They've already moved. You need to get out. Now." I looked at Nathan, then back to Sophia. "What the hell is going on?" Sophia grabbed my arm, pulling me toward the door. "We need to go. I'll explain later, but you're in danger. It's not just the company anymore, it's everything. People are going to start disappearing." Nathan's smirk faded as he looked at us, his eyes flashing with something darker. "You really think you can outrun this?" "It's too late for that." But we didn't have time to argue. Sophia dragged me down the hallway, her grip tight on my arm. "They've got someone on the inside," she said as we moved. "Someone close. And now they're ready to strike." I was disoriented, my mind reeling. Who was behind this? Who was the true enemy? And why did Nathan know so much? Sophia pulled me into the elevator. "Listen to me, Arlo. We don't have much time. We need to get to the vault before they do." The words barely registered before the elevator doors slammed shut. The air in the confined space was heavy, pressing in on me from all sides. My breath quickened as the elevator descended. I felt the weight of the world on my shoulders. Everything I had worked for, everything I had uncovered, was at risk. But I couldn't back down now. The doors slid open with a soft ding, and we stepped into the underground parking garage. I could see the headlights of a car coming toward us. It was a long, sleek black SUV. I didn't need to look twice to know it wasn't a friendly visit. Sophia's face paled as she pulled me toward my car. "They're here," she whispered. And just like that, I knew this wasn't just a corporate battle anymore. This was war. and I was in the middle of it. The engine of the SUV roared to life, and I felt my pulse race as we reached my car. It was time to make a move. "Drive," Sophia urged. I slid into the driver's seat, slamming the door shut. The tires screeched as I floored the pedal, speeding out of the garage. Behind us, the black SUV followed. We were being chased. And this time, there was no turning back. The game had changed. I could hear the sound of the rain battering against the windows as I sat in my office, staring at the papers scattered before me. The deal, the lies, the manipulation, it all led to this moment. The weight of it all felt suffocating, and yet, there was an unexpected clarity in the chaos. What had begun as a battle for control of the company had turned into something much deeper. It was no longer about revenge or power. It was about truth, and the price one pays for it. Sophia had disappeared. The authorities had been briefed, and the whispers of her involvement in the mess had begun to surface. The storm was coming. I knew they were watching me, waiting for me to slip. But I had no intention of doing so. As the hours dragged on, I kept replaying the events in my mind, piecing together the puzzle of how far my family had gone to protect their secrets. My father's betrayal, Nathan's lies, it was all a smokescreen. There was something bigger beneath the surface, something more sinister. I had always known my family was hiding something. But I hadn't understood the depths of their corruption until now. It wasn't just about money or the company. It was about a carefully constructed illusion that had kept everyone in their place. And I had shattered it. A knock on the door snapped me out of my thoughts. I didn't need to look up to know who it was. The sound of his footsteps was all too familiar. Nathan. He stepped into the room, his expression unreadable. But there was a subtle tension in his posture, something different in the way he held himself. "I told you," he said, his voice low, "you don't know what you're up against." I leaned back in my chair, refusing to flinch. I know exactly what I'm up against. The question is, do you? He hesitated. You think you've won. But this isn't just about the company, Arlo. It never was. I narrowed my eyes. Then what is it about, Nathan? He exhaled slowly, taking a step closer. It's about survival. And power. The truth is, there's always been someone pulling the strings. And it's not just your family. I stood, my pulse quickening. What the hell are you talking about? He reached into his jacket and pulled out a small envelope, placing it on the desk in front of me. I didn't touch it right away, but my instincts told me it was something important, something I wasn't prepared to face. The truth you've been looking for is in there, Nathan said, his eyes cold. And once you open it, there's no turning back. The weight of his words settled over me like a blanket of ice. I picked up the envelope, my hand steady despite the pounding of my heart. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the words typed neatly in black ink. The real game begins now. I stared at the words for what felt like an eternity, the meaning sinking in slowly, like a ship submerging in water. It was a warning, something that threatened to pull me into a world I wasn't ready for. I looked up at Nathan, my breath shallow. What is this? Who's behind all this? He smiled, a dark glint in his eyes. It's not about who, Arlo. It's about what. The truth is, your family isn't the only one with secrets. There's someone bigger, someone who's been controlling all of this from the shadows. I felt a shiver run down my spine. You're telling me you're just the messenger? Nathan shrugged, his gaze not leaving mine. In a way. But don't fool yourself. You're already in deeper than you realize. I shoved the paper back into the envelope, the weight of it still hanging in the air. I had to act. I had to take control before it all slipped away. Get out, I said, my voice steady despite the whirlwind in my chest. He hesitated but didn't argue. As he turned to leave, he paused at the door and glanced back at me. This isn't over. It's just the beginning. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The words were hollow, meaningless. The game was changing, but I would be damned if I let it consume me. I moved quickly, grabbing my phone and making the call I knew I had to make. It was time to confront the people who had been playing their hand in secret, those who had been pulling the strings all along. But as I made my way to the elevator, a sudden realization hit me: the truth, as powerful as it was, couldn't change the past. It couldn't undo the damage done, the lives ruined, the families destroyed. The only thing I could control now was what happened next. I took a deep breath as the doors to the elevator closed. The familiar hum of the machine seemed to echo louder than before, the moment stretching into eternity. For the first time in months, I felt a sense of resolve. No matter what came next, I had fought for this, for my own truth, for my own future. And as the elevator descended, I knew there was no going back. In this game, the stakes were always high. But it was the cost of winning that would define me. And I was ready for whatever came next.